Show me your heart. I know that it's beating. Tell me that you love me too. So I know your heart is true. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. Do you like cryptocurrency, politics, economics, activism, or art? Then check out The Tatiana Show, where you can learn all about it in a fun and non-intimidating way, as if you're just hanging with friends. Go to thetatianashow.com and listen now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Proof of Love. The sky is falling, but we're here to catch you. I'm here today with Stephanie Murphy. Hey, Steph.
Hi.
And of course, no, not of course. We don't have Lauren with us today because of course she has to work. But we do have a very special guest today. And in the midst of all this excitement, we're going to talk about fear and love with the Andreas Antonopoulos. Woo! Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Tatiana. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I think everybody's doing pretty good, all things considered. I've been on a prepping bonanza. My making fun of the virus has completely changed into prepster. But, you know, I think that we're thinking about some maybe larger issues here at Proof of Love. We like to talk about matters of the heart. And we're excited to have you here. What do you think about love? Are you a fan?
That's a softball question if I ever heard one.
Yeah, I'm a fan. And I think it's really important to talk about that, especially now when people are in a state of fear. Then it's even more important to talk about love.
So I think we should just clarify and recap for anybody who's listening to this in the future, or later on down the line. Right now, we are in the midst of kind of a widespread freak out about coronavirus. Of course, we're in the United States, at least Tatiana and I are, and a lot of people are on lockdown. There are states declaring states of emergency, stuff like that. We've been told to socially isolate. And this is not exactly a new thing for me as an introvert, but I kind of would like to talk about that, like loneliness in a hyper-connected world where sometimes we also get quite isolated because, you know, maybe we're favoring online community over in-person community. There's been a shift away from social media over the last few years, and I know that has impacted my social life a little bit. And I'm wondering about if that's something you guys want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the requirement for isolation is going to be particularly difficult, especially for people who suffer from anxiety or depression, because social isolation is an unnatural thing for a social species. And that can be rather difficult and potentially psychologically damaging for a lot of people. It's almost ironic because this is like revenge of the otaku gamer nerds. Who asked to isolate have to do absolutely nothing to change, right? And the more social you were in your previous life, the more disruptive this is going to be for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm single, and I'll tell you guys that on the one hand, I think the isolation is going to be great, right? Because I could do a lot of personal stuff. I could clean out all my drawers. I can, reflect, catch up on a lot of different work and sort of come to myself. But on the other hand, it's not really great for dating. I guess you can start meeting people online, but I don't think that that's very effective. I think that couples will probably fare a little bit better, and there'll probably be a bunch of babies 9 months from now. What do you guys think? I mean, do you think that you're going to be lonely where you are? How do you think that people can overcome that?
Well, when it comes to prioritizing love over fear, yes, part of that is loving other people, but part of that is also loving and caring for yourself. So I think even for those who are completely isolated, there's an opportunity here to be more introspective, to become more in touch with your own emotions, and to take good care of yourself. And that's an absolute requirement when things are difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to let you weigh in first, Andreas, but personally, I've been kind of struggling with just how to have friendships as an adult in general. And it is always great to go back to self-love, but I think like growing up as a kid, I was quite awkward and I didn't really learn how to have friendships, really. It was like kind of just trying to survive in this kind of school environment. And I don't think I learned a lot of very good social skills. And so that's been what's going on for me over the last few years, is kind of like a retreat inward to work on myself and try to develop the social skills that I never learned. But it is a real struggle to like even meet people that you might want to be friends with or date as an adult. A lot of people complain about that. And if you don't want to do online dating and if you don't have ways to meet people, it can be quite difficult.
Which, is not an isolated phenomenon. The joke goes that the real miracle of Jesus's life is that he had 12 adult friends in his 30s.
I never heard that one, but that's good.
And the truth is that most adults have one or two maybe close friends, and then a whole bunch of acquaintances related to various activities like work and a broader social circle, leftovers from high school, neighbors, etc. And even that's very difficult to maintain beyond casual acquaintance.
There's something to that Jesus story though too, because Jesus wasn't exactly like on an equal level. Maybe like they were his disciples. So is there something to like putting yourself out there on the internet as a personality and then getting a following? And are those people actually your friends? Because I've been podcasting since 2008. A lot of people know me from my podcasts, and I've made some friends that way. But some of them have lasted for sure. But sometimes it feels like a strange dynamic because the person knows me better than I know them from listening to my shows. And it doesn't exactly feel like an ideal setup for a friendship. Does that happen to you too, both of you?
Tatiana?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes people know me and they feel familiar with me, but I also feel a bit of a kinship because of a shared ideology, which I think can get me into trouble. Because I don't think that people are always your friends just because they are your fans or they say that they're in the same club as you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that to be a very weird kind of asymmetric relationship where people think they know you very well, but they don't know you. They just know part of you. And that's if you're being relatively authentic with your public persona. They still only know a small part of you. I think it's also kind of disingenuous friendship because if people look up to you or are followers or fans in that social media setting, they're not the same kind of people who will laugh at your bullshit and speak truth to you and be thoroughly unimpressed by you, which is, you need in a friendship and a genuine relationship with someone. So I don't think that is friendship. That's not friendship. Friendship is the person you can share the aspects of you that you're not so proud of, that don't make you look good, the person you can be honest with and who will call you out and at the same time be supportive when you're weak and be empathetic. So I don't think social media offers that. It gives the illusion of that. That's kind of a dopamine heavy friendship, and that's not real.
I want to change gears for a second. Andreas, you're on the road all the time. You're meeting people. I know we're talking about serious things, but do you ever get any crazy stalker fans? And can you tell us any of those stories? If you don't want to go in this direction, we don't have to. We can take this part out.
Well,
but I was thinking about that. You must have some like really kind of interesting things happen to you on the road. But at the same time, you're a little bit of like a different kind of celebrity. I mean, you're not like I don't know, like a Hollywood movie star or something.
Well, yeah, and it's weird. I think that's one of the things that the internet and social media have done is they've given the opportunity of micro celebrity in a very weird way to a lot of people in these narrow niches. So you get some of the downsides of that much sooner than you get any of the upsides. I've there are a lot of strange people out there, and yes, I've had plenty of experiences with strange people, and people who are worryingly and sometimes frighteningly strange, from dozens of people who have claimed to be Satoshi and are very adamant that I tell the world the truth about that, to and just to weird fans. But the bottom line is that for the most part, the vast majority of people I meet are lovely. They share their enthusiasm for this technology. They're happy to see me. They treat me with kindness. And I find that, as a way that I recharge my batteries when things get difficult with the drama, or when the markets are behaving weirdly, etc. My way to recenter and ground myself is to go out into the community and meet with people and do a meetup, or go to a gathering and talk to people about what got them into crypto, and share these stories about our common enthusiasm. It's always very similar stories, right? People have this down the rabbit hole experience. Their life gets disrupted. They have this tingly fascination and enthusiasm, and they want to share that. And that's a wonderful moment, and it's something we all share. And that recharges me. If anything, what I'm worried about is that now I won't be able to travel, is essentially for the next 6 months for sure, possibly longer. I'm not traveling at all. And that means that I'm not going to get that opportunity to meet real people in real life, to counteract the fake people on social media drama bullshit, which until now has been my go-to. So I have to find other ways of coping.
Yeah, I mean, how do you cope with, like, for example, the daily drama that you would see on a place like Twitter? And I know you don't even use other social media.
Well, I am failing this week, or the last couple of weeks for sure. But in general, I cope by limiting my exposure to social media to specific times and time frames. I and I try to mix into that real experiences, going for walks, being out in nature, recharging, listening to music, dancing, singing in a silly way, hanging out with friends, physical fitness, things that do not involve screens. Now, right now, I'm going to be able to do less outdoorsy stuff, but there's still opportunities for those who are lucky enough to live in a place which is not too densely populated, to get out into nature and go far from other human beings and spend some time in the outdoors and do physically active things and get sunshine and things like that. I think these are incredibly important right now, as well as keeping, kind of physically fit and things like that. But screen time is dangerous. And I think it's a bit like, drinking or any other activity, where it gives you a short-term boost and it can be abused.
And
And
then you need to detox from it by taking time off.
exactly. And I think one of the things we might be able to talk about today is one of my favorite topics, which is the neurochemicals of fear, love, and attention. So the
Okay, yeah.
um, and that has been a very, very important tool for me to understand and regulate my own emotions. It's something that was introduced to me by my therapist. I'm a big believer in having mental health support for any adult who wants to improve their own well-being. And as someone who in the past has suffered quite severely from anxiety and occasionally from depression, learning how to understand and regulate my emotions has been really important to me. One of the things I learned is about kind of the three major mood states and the corresponding neurochemicals that occur in those mood states, and how to shift from one to the other. And I think that's a great topic to talk about now, because if we're talking about how love beats fear, that's not just a spiritual thing. It's also a biological neurochemical thing. There's a practical aspect to this.
Yeah, I'm interested in talking about that. But first, I want to know if, like, where does this idea come from that fear and love are like two opposite sides of the same thing? Because I remember I first heard it in Donnie Darko, the movie, as a joke, where there was this woman that's heading up the cheerleading squad, and she says, "Fear and love are the greatest of human emotions, and if you're not feeling one, then you're feeling the other one," or something like that. And is that really true, or is it just a truism? Do you know, Andreas? What's the history on that?
Well, I think that's the big insight for me, which is that it's not a two-sided coin or one opposite the other. It's more of a triangle. And the best way I've had it described is to think of it as three different colors or 3 points of a triangle. Fear occupies one corner, and let's color that red. On another corner is attention and stimulation, which will color blue. And on a third corner is love, which will color green. And so the corresponding neurochemicals that correspond to that for fear are the stress hormones, cortisol and
Adrenaline, norepinephrine.
adrenaline,
Mm-hmm.
etc. You know these things much better than me, Stephanie, I'm sure. And on the attention, it's dopamine, right? The primary one. And on the love side, the green side, it's oxytocin. Well, the interesting thing about how these neurochemicals play out is that if you find yourself in a position of fear, many of us try to get out of that with avoidant and stimulative behaviors. We bury ourselves in screens and try to stimulate our brains with distraction. And that's moving from red to blue, which is dopamine. And the problem with that is that it's a short-term fix, but when it's over, when you stop stimulating with dopamine, because you've overstimulated, you bounce right back into anxiety, and in that round of the cycle, it becomes heightened, and you end up in this cycle of bouncing between red and blue, fear and stimulation, trying to escape the fear. So that's an actual chemical process that happens, and it's a well-studied phenomenon in psychology, in the psychology of anxiety. So the rule of thumb that my therapist explained to me, which I found very useful, is when in red, go to green before you go to blue. And what that means is if you're in a state of fear, anxiety, panic, depression, all of those are related emotions. What you need is not stimulation and attention. If you go to dopamine, you're just going to bounce right back into fear. What you need to do is go into a state that produces oxytocin, and that's music, hugs, dancing, outdoors, physical fitness, and activities like that produce oxytocin. And if you go there, then your autonomic systems calm down. You can then add a bit of stimulation in the form of dopamine. You don't have to avoid pleasure and joy and stimulating your attention forever. But you can only do that in a manner where you're coming from a good place, and you're not using it as an avoidant mechanism. Now,
That's so interesting. So I've I thought of something that could throw a wrench in the works, right? Like some people, when they hear, okay, if you're feeling anxious or whatever, you need oxytocin, so they're going to go seek out some porn, maybe, right? But
But porn doesn't produce oxytocin as much as it produces dopamine.
aha,
It's a dopamine stimulant primarily.
because it still is the screen.
Uh, no, because it's because it produces
Because it's
pleasure,
made to produce dopamine.
pleasure, orgasms. Yeah. So I mean that's all dopamine. So that's avoidant behavior. What you're trying to do is hit your brain with a sledgehammer of pleasure to dislodge the fear, but it doesn't. All it does is it bounces right back. And you need to go to less stimulative but more calming types of activities. So music, dancing, physical fitness, green, nature,
Meditation, yoga, that kind of stuff.
meditation, yoga, all of those things are oxytocin, cuddles, physical intimacy, um, not sex, but physical intimacy. Um, all of those things are actually oxytocin producing. And if they don't have a stimulative dopamine producing effect, then it calms down your system so that you can then process the fear more easily.
Oh, that's great. I find that really interesting. Tatiana, do you want to weigh in?
Well, so how do you stimulate it if you're by yourself and porn isn't going to help? So, pets, I don't know. Like, what if people
Pets,
are on lockdown and they can't cuddle anyone?
pets, music, meditation, yoga,
Oh, all right,
um,
fine. I forgot about those other ones, but I guess so.
exercise,
It bears
dancing,
repeating.
singing, plants,
I have 7 guitars. I'm going to play
flowers,
each and every one of them.
crochet, any kind of experience that you associate with being calm, um, kind of losing the kind of losing yourself in thought, but not by distraction, but because you're calm and meditative. That usually is something that is strongly associated with oxytocin, and it's something you can research. You can look online for oxytocin related activities. I found this to be very, very useful for me, primarily because as someone who suffered from anxiety quite strongly in the past, I used to have panic attacks and I had a nervous breakdown. Very, very bad, very unpleasant. And over the past 15 years, I've become much better regulating that kind of response. And the thing is, when you're in the thick of it, right, when you're in the state of stress and fear, the last thing you want to do is the thing you absolutely need. Okay, let's take a deep breath, go for a walk, do some yoga, meditate. Let's do some gardening, water the plants, pet the cats. And you're like, no, I want to be on Twitter and playing Counter-Strike. Um,
Yeah,
right? The
that's not
last
good
thing
for mental health.
right. Because, and this is key, because dopamine produces the fastest way to dampen down that negative feeling. But in long term, it's counterproductive because you bounce right back. So as long as you're doing the stimulative thing, you're not stressed out and fearful. You can distract yourself. But the moment you stop doing it, it comes rushing back in because you haven't given it space, right? So, and my tendency as someone who was anxious was to always do that, to avoid, distract, stimulate my brain, and that kept backfiring because then I just got deeper into stress once I stopped. And trying to teach myself, yeah, even though I don't feel like playing some music now or going for a walk or doing something like that, I know that it will help me. I know that doing some physical fitness, going for a walk, something like that will help me. I just have to give it the space.
I like thinking of time as not in a frame, because I'll get very overwhelmed with certain things, and I find myself really like having this immediate need to do something. I'm pretty impulsive sometimes. But I think if you think that, well, I could still be super angry, but I'll wait an hour, or, and see how it goes then, or
Yeah,
set
or
a
I
little
could
bit of
eat that,
time.
but tomorrow. That's one I use.
Oh, oh yeah, that's not a bad way of delaying that kind of thing. Yeah, or I don't know, just kind of, sort of little goals I think are a little bit more easy to manage when you're feeling overwhelmed, at least for me.
Well, yeah, I think what you're describing sounds very much like the kind of mindfulness practice that is very strongly recommended in anxiety and depression and in any state of fear and stress, which is if you say, I can be angry tomorrow, or I can eat this tomorrow, or I'm okay for now, or count to 10, any of those practices. What you're really doing is, instead of trying to control, stop, or avoid the emotion, you're simply observing, accepting, and letting it go, or giving it space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that, and in this case, it's space in the form of time, but it's the same thing, right? And I that's a proven effective practice. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I think that's really what we need to think about now that things have become weird in the environment around us. Because the truth is that almost all of the things that we're responding to are not real. We're responding to other people's emotion and expression about what is real. We're responding to other people's reaction to what is real. We're responding to the anticipation and fear of what might happen. All of these are things that don't exist in the present, right? They're either regret about the past, or fear about the future, or reflecting other people's emotions about the past and the future. In the present, my body that's healthy is comfortably sitting on a couch and talking to two people I really like and enjoy talking to, and we're okay. And so part of that kind of approach we have to have, I think, is that kind of mindfulness in the present.
Mm-hmm.
Love the now.
Well,
Yep.
but does that mean that people should be complacent? Because I feel like that's a little bit at odds with,
No, not
yes,
at
right
all.
now we're sitting here, everything is good, but I don't know. I mean, I think people should be going out and getting ready for potentially something bad. I mean, how do you balance that, uh,
Yeah.
that now and the future?
Well, fear is a very, very important evolved response that helps us anticipate and plan for and react to real danger. And in this particular case, and some of the things that are happening are real danger. They're not imagined threats, right? So that's a useful tool if what it does for you is motivates you to act in a way that reduces your risk or improves your chance of managing or mitigating the risk, or you take action to improve your well-being. Absolutely. And fear is a great tool to if it motivates you, but not if it paralyzes you. And so that's the fine line. If it gets to the point where you're so fearful that your immune system is compromised because of stress, and you're terrified to leave your home so you don't have any provisions, or you're stocking up 700 rolls of toilet paper, while screaming and fighting at other people in the supermarket. Yeah, that's not serving you. I think there's a difference between
Or
fearing.
anyone.
Yeah, exactly. There's a difference between fearing the rational and using that as a motivator because you know that some things are in your future, versus taking all of the possible risks in the future, making them immediate, unavoidable, and maximal, and then trying to will your way out of them. And that's paralyzing.
Do you use cognitive biases or the idea of that, Andreas, to kind of like keep a reality check on what is rational and what's not? Because I know that, one thing that a lot of people do is like check in with their social contacts to see, am I crazy about this, or are you thinking the same thing, right? And as we become more socially isolated, or go into a temporary period of isolation, that can get lost. So how do you kind of like keep yourself sane and do a reality check if you're lacking social connections?
That's a really good point. One of the most fascinating things I've learned about cognitive biases is that even those who are well educated in the impact and power of cognitive biases, while participating in a trial, a clinical trial to evaluate the impact of cognitive biases, and being told that they will be evaluated in the impact of cognitive biases, cannot stop those from taking hold. I don't remember exactly where that study was done, but it was hilarious. It was basically a bunch of people in psychology participating in a trial where they told them, we're going to test how easily affected you are by cognitive bias. We're now testing this cognitive bias. And then people fell for it anyway, because you can't outsmart cognitive bias. The tool with which you would outsmart cognitive bias is the one that has the bias. So, it's like trying to jumpstart a broken car with the broken car.
Yeah, it is really difficult. And that doesn't
Debug the
surprise me at
computer.
all.
Yeah.
That's why
It's
every
like,
time, yeah.
go ahead.
That's why every time, someone claims to be like hyper logical and like more logical than thou, I don't believe it. Because we all have bugs in our brain. That's how millions of years of evolution have shaped us as human beings in our thought processes. The only thing I think you can do is maintain awareness. And that
Right.
comes back to mindfulness. And
And
so,
perspective, as you said, with your social contacts. I think intelligent people are even more prone to some types of cognitive biases than others.
mm-hmm. And as we know from another cognitive bias, everyone thinks that they are in the top 5% of intelligence.
And in the bottom 5% of susceptibility to cognitive bias.
Yes.
So here's the other thing. If you look at all of the kinds of responses you can have to moments of crisis and risk, for me, rather than trying to decide whether my assessment of the probability of the event is correct, because I know that is very difficult to do, I pro-con the outcomes as if the probabilities are equal or if they could go either way. So for example, let's say you're trying to decide, do I wear a mask? Do I start isolating? Do I buy the Costco 100-pound bag of beans, right? The question is, if I am right, and these steps are or might be necessary in the near future, and I have the financial ability to do that now, what's the impact? If I'm wrong and I've miscalculated the probability or impact of this event, what's that outcome? And then weigh the two outcomes as if you don't know the probability of them happening. So in some cases, it actually makes sense to say, spending a small amount of money to buy provisions that if you don't eat over the next 3 months and things end up not being serious, you can easily donate to a soup kitchen and or just spend less money on eating out at restaurants. In that case, there's no real downside to taking those precautions. So if you're completely wrong, the end result is that you've spent a bit more money, but you actually have some extra provisions. But if you don't do anything and you're wrong about the outcome, that can be much worse. So this is almost like Pascal's wager, right? Which is
Hmm.
Which is, if God exists and I don't believe in him, bad things happen. If God doesn't exist and I don't believe in him, nothing happens. And therefore,
Therefore, it doesn't really hurt to believe in God. But
it doesn't hurt to appeal to every single deity, at least in the last 5 minutes of your life. So to
yeah,
take
but
this,
there's a counter argument to that, which is that it does have a cost on your life if you spend your time being religious and, as you said, in the last 5 minutes of your life being the key word, right?
right, and it has a financial cost. Like, social isolation is going to have a financial impact on every country in the world. So if people do it and it turns out it's not necessary, we are going to suffer a very big financial impact from that. And all of the activities we're taking right now can have a financial impact. The question is whether you think that financial impact is worth it, vis-a-vis the potential human impact if it turns out the risk is real. We're talking about coronavirus, but we could equally be talking about the state of the economy, right? Do you put aside an emergency fund if you can, and divest yourself from some of your investments and lower your risk in your portfolio in case things go really bad? No, if everybody does that, then that's a self-fulfilling prophecy of things go really bad. So you have to balance these out. But in general, when I do that balancing, I distrust my own. I try to distrust my own assessment of the probability of these events. There is a chance that I'm the crazy one at the moment. Certainly for the last 3 weeks, a lot of people around me have been telling me that I'm overreacting. And we'll see. There are sometimes I hope to be proven wrong.
We wanted to ask you about dating advice, Andreas. Do you have any dating advice for people in the crypto space? Assuming that we all get to see each other again.
It was more like, sorry, you can answer whatever you want, Andreas, if you want to talk about this at all. But we were curious, like, do men ask you for dating advice? And then if so, what do you tell them?
No, men do not ask me for dating advice. Men do not ask other men for dating advice almost ever. In my experience, at least.
Wait, what? Guys don't talk to each other about dating chicks and ask each other for advice? That doesn't make sense. I've seen
No,
movies.
because, well, maybe in movies, but in my personal experience, that those kinds of topics never come up. And I think everybody's too busy posturing so hard that they have all of that totally sorted, under control, and they don't need anybody's advice because they're super good at it. I mean, men don't ask for directions to the grocery store and the gas station. You think we're going to ask for directions for dating from other men? No. I don't know. Maybe I'm generalizing. That's my experience. So nobody has asked me for dating advice. Maybe it's because they clearly see that I don't have any expertise in that. Being a geek does not in any way make me someone people would ask for advice.
Well, do you have any anyway?
Um,
I don't know. Let's say you had a kid or a nephew or a friend you were fond of. It's a dating show. Anything? I mean, you talk about some of these distance problems that everybody has in this posturing, and we oftentimes talk about the whole Instagram world. I consider you a little bit more of a sincere kind of character. Do you think that that's a part of a successful relationship? And do you think that that's even possible? I feel like a lot of guys are afraid to date women, and I don't even understand what they're so afraid of.
so I think that has a lot to do with self-esteem, and I think it also has a lot to do with patriarchy. So first of all, from my perspective, I've had some very difficult relationships in my life, and I've also had some amazing, incredible relationships in my life. And the difference had a lot more to do with how well I knew myself than how well I got to know the other person, and how confident I was in myself than how confident I was in the other person. So if I'm self-confident and I have high self-esteem and I have expectations and standards, then I'm more likely to be in a relationship that respects those expectations and standards. And I think probably the most important advice I would give is don't short sell yourself. And people generally short sell themselves because they don't have the self-esteem to expect that they can and should be loved exactly as they are without any changes. But that takes a lot of self-confidence, right? To say, I'm okay with exactly who I am right now. I don't need to change. And there are people out there who will love me exactly as I am. And all I need to do is find them, which is then becomes simply a numbers game.
Would you say that if you spend time working on self-acceptance and self-love, that you tend to attract people who don't want to change you and also accept you as you are?
Yes. And self-awareness. You have to first know, what is it about yourself that you like? What do you want?
Who are you? Yeah.
Who are you? What's important to you? And that's hard because, of course, our brains lie to us about these things. Sometimes you learn it through painful experience. You're like, okay, turns out that's not what I wanted. It's just what I thought I wanted because I was too afraid to ask for what I really wanted. I think it's important to have very, very high expectations. And when I say very, very high expectations, I don't mean dating a 10 or a 9. I mean high expectations of the quality of interaction, the intimacy, the honesty, the communication, and the behavior that you expect from others. And you have to model that by delivering that yourself. So if you treat others poorly, they will treat you poorly. If you accept others treating you poorly, they will treat you poorly. And if you treat others and expect to be treated only in a very specific, high quality way, then you have more of a chance of narrowing down the list until you find people who are willing to treat you that way. And that requires a lot of confidence. You have to say, no, sorry, this is not how I expect to be treated, and I don't treat other people that way. I found that most of the problems I've had in relationships in the past is because I accepted being treated in ways that I shouldn't have.
I don't date very often, right? And people could say, oh, you should have standards. And that's a very nice thing to say. But what if you only end up meeting like a couple people a year that you even like? That's not very good. I'm just saying. I don't know if this is a panacea either way, but I think that there's some kind of a balance because sometimes people will reject a lot of different people because they're not perfect too. So how do you know where that line is?
Well, again, you can't reject people because they're not perfect. You quite the opposite. I think you have to expect and accept other people's imperfection, as long as that imperfection is not an imperfection in terms of their ability to understand and behave around other people. If the imperfection is they lack self-awareness, they lack boundaries, they lack the ability to express intimacy, that's not an imperfection that you can fix. That's an imperfection they have to fix themselves first. One of the difficulties, of course, is that by a certain age, we reach a point where the dating pool is full of the people who are mostly avoidant and insecure in relationships who keep cycling through. Whereas many of the people who are secure in relationships are already in relationships. And I think that's very, very difficult. It makes things very difficult, to your point, Tatiana, absolutely. At which point you need to meet more people. One of the interesting things, I think, is that meeting people online under certain circumstances can actually remove some of the distractions. If the way you meet people is through their Instagram photos and exchanging sexy pictures, then what you're going to get is all superficial. If the way you meet people is through an anonymous avatar that means something but doesn't show anything, and you have to interact with that person purely on the basis of what they type. I've found that I've developed some very, very interesting relationships with people who I at first had no idea what they looked like. And I had to judge them entirely based on the written word and no other signals. That cuts through a lot of the bullshit. It's a lot harder to hide your personality if you have a lot of conversations without any other distractions.
This reminds me of the story that you tell in your talks sometimes, Andreas, about the early days of the internet where people were using bulletin board systems. And
Yeah.
and you can tell it if you want, but the thing I was thinking of was that you would say that women would like change their names to a gender neutral or even a guy's name to like avoid being judged as a woman. And then there would be fake like men posing as women trying to
Yeah.
get people to sign up for dating sites. So you really couldn't believe anything you read about the gender of a person's screen name.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, one of my good friends in high school was Helen, whose name was Anthony. Um,
And then there were fake
and
Helens trying to get you to buy a dating membership.
well, no, Anthony was the fake Helen.
I
So
see what you mean.
Anthony was online as Helen and flirted continuously, and just, teenagers being teenagers. We're talking like really early teens, right? Like 14, 15. And I got to talk a lot to this person. And then one day they told me that it was actually Anthony, not Helen. And we then became quite good friends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Yeah. And it was just one of those screen name versus real person. I don't know the modern dating environments. I haven't really been in the dating environment since the emergence of all of these apps and dating sites. I've never done that. I've never used that. All of the people I've ever dated, I've met by happenstance, through friends, in social environments, in real life. And never have I gone on a date where I met someone online and then connected through an app. That happened after I was already in a long-term relationship, and then even after that, I got back into long-term relationships before I got into the dating scene.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know what it's like out there, and I'm so glad. I'm so glad I don't know, honestly.
So, all right, it sounds like if I could summarize your advice, work on your self-awareness, self-love, and self-acceptance. Learn how to calm your nervous system with oxytocin when you're feeling anxious or fearful, and hang in there and try to get some oxytocin in any way you can that's safe and socially isolated.
Yeah, love conquers all. And you have to start by knowing and loving yourself, which is absolutely trite and cliche advice, but nevertheless, true and scientifically proven.
Well,
Awesome.
I'm bursting with joy to spend time alone. I mean, sure, it would be nice to have some kind of romantic quarantine of some kind, but I'm looking forward to making a lot of music and cooking a lot of my provisions that I had to procure immediately. I don't know. I think it's going to be, a fun apocalypse. Let's all stay in a positive mood. I know I'm going to be making more music and sharing that because I think that that'll chill people out a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely wanted to talk about, Armageddon and stuff pretty much all day, every day for the past week. But yeah, I think it's good for people to turn it off a little bit. And thanks everybody
Yeah.
for tuning into Proof of Love.
And well, if people like Andreas and hearing me on the same show, you should definitely check out Andreas's audiobooks that are narrated by me, which are called The Internet of Money, and you can find them on Audible. There's another one coming soon.
And also listen to us on the Let's Talk Bitcoin show that we co-host, of course.
Indeed.
Thanks everybody. We'll see you next time on Proof of Love. Show me your heart. I know that it's beating. Tell me that you love me too. So I know your heart is true. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love. 'Cause I need some proof of love.
Thank you for listening to Proof of Love. Please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Proof of Lovecast. More episodes can be found at proofoflovecast.com. And make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. Proof of Love has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond. You are listening to Proof of Love with Tatiana Moroz, Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and Lauren Kasovitz. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on Proof of Love is intended as financial advice, legal advice, therapy, or really anything other than entertainment. Please take everything that you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're hearing us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on, or of any of the sponsors or affiliate products that you may hear about on the show.